And now, let's join ace broadcaster Mamode Akugha as he takes us inside the Niger Delta.
Hello out there and welcome to the program. It's Inside the Niger Delta, the authentic voice of Nigeria's oil-rich region. I'm your regular host, Mamode Akugha. Today's package is dominated by efforts being made by the federal government to tackle the challenges of poverty, insecurity, and underdevelopment bedeviling the Niger Delta. Well, in the course of the program, take a look at the impacts of the federal government's intervention on oil-producing communities, as well as the people's response to some projects and programs put in place to transform their lives. We kickstart with a report on our road construction project initiated by the Niger Delta Development Commission Nddc at WOKEREBE community in Ubiakbo local government area of Rivers State. Next in our lineup is a special report on renewed efforts by the federal government to ensure speedy passage of the Petroleum Industry Bill. And moving on, we'll bring you an update on the controversial suspension of the new minimum wage by the government of Delta State. And finally, in today's package, we'll take a look at efforts being made by the federal government to restore livelihoods for oil-impacted communities in Ogoni land. Inside the Niger Delta, the authentic voice of Nigeria's oil-rich region, we'll be back in just a moment. Don't go away.
Niger Delta Development Commission, Nddc, determined to make a difference.
Welcome back. It's Inside the Niger Delta, the authentic voice of Nigeria's oil-rich region. Distraught residents of WOKEREBE community in Lot 2 of Rumukurushi Town, Ubiakbo local government area of Rivers State, have called on the Niger Delta Development Commission, Nddc, to compel the contractor handling the WOKEREBE pipeline road construction project to return to site. The call was made 4 months after the road construction project was put on hold without any form of communication with its intended beneficiaries. Correspondent Lovely Ofigo has to report.
Long after it was awarded, work commenced on WOKEREBE pipeline road construction project in March this year. Contractor handling the project mobilized the site to commence a poorly delivered drainage work and graded the road. Since then, no progress has been achieved on the project, even as the contractor's whereabouts is not known to the community. With no address provided on the signpost bearing details of the contract, it has been impossible to contact the contractor.
Since then, we have not seen this man, and he ran away and succeeded in mounting his signpost. I don't know whether the signpost is showing that he has finished work or not, or he came to the site or what, I don't know. So up till now, the community is still asking, where is the contractor?
The WOKEREBE pipeline road construction project was awarded to provide easy access to neighboring communities of Igboeche, Eneka, and Rumokoro. Expectedly, its abandonment has crippled economic activities in all affected communities.
We don't suffer. We fit stay here month to month, nothing like car where they pass our road. Even if we buy market, one carry come inside here. They know they agree carry us come because of the bad road.
The road is not good at all, and I find it very difficult moving in and out. Sometimes I prefer not to go out with the car because it has really seriously been affecting my car. The ball joint, the bushing, the camber, and the linkage, even my shock absorber. I have to be changing it regularly because of this bad road.
In trying to make it possible since the contractor left without a word, concerned residents of WOKEREBE have attempted remedial works on the road, but their efforts have been compromised by constant rainfall. They are calling on the Nddc, therefore, to get the contractor back to site.
The contract must have been awarded since last year, and the man just decided to show by March and just do a magic and go away. Maybe he must have gone to show somewhere a road had been completed and claiming that he has done the road, while this one is the original road that was awarded to the company. Let them call the contractor back to site.
Assuming this road is done, the benefit is enormous. Now, this road linked from here to Rumokose community. If you're coming from this road, I don't mean the road is done, then you don't have business, any motorists don't have business at Eleme Junction. They will just take straight away and straight to Obibo. The link is Obibo. Here is Igbeche and the Igbeche Road. So many benefits. Assuming this road is done, the economic benefit is enormous, like I said.
Our crew made unsuccessful efforts to contact one of the engineers on site, Engineer Samuel Chidebere, as he failed to take calls on his mobile telephone. At the time of filing this report, the Nddc was yet to respond to a request for the actual status of the WOKEREBE pipeline road construction project. However, some community leaders disclosed that it was one of the emergency projects awarded few years ago to facilitate development across the Niger Delta. The current state of the road obviously defeats the purpose for which a contract for its construction was awarded by the Nddc. As a matter of urgency, the Commission is expected to provide relevant details on the actual status of the WOKEREBE pipeline road construction project, which appears to be one of the 12,000 projects abandoned on account of inadequate project supervision over the years.
Inside the Niger Delta. Nddc, established in the year 2000 to help develop Nigeria's Niger Delta region. After 2 decades, what is their scorecard?
The amount of money which the federal government is religiously allocating to Nddc, we would like to see the results on the ground.
They have been doing a lot in the last 19 years, but if they were doing quality projects, I'm sure that we would have seen so much on the ground.
What is the state of the Nddc project in your community? Tell us about it and we will report it. Send us an email to insidethenigerdelta@gmail.com or call us on 080-920-76444. Inside the Niger Delta, the authentic voice of Nigeria's oil-rich region.
Nigeria's Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Temepria Silva, recently hinted that the revised Petroleum Industry Bill, PIB, was ready for transmission to the National Assembly for passage into law, 12 years after it was first introduced on the floor of the National Assembly. In their reaction, some Niger Deltans have demanded to know what provisions have been made to protect the interests of oil-producing communities in the proposed legislation, as well as relevant policies to ensure proper governance structure in the oil and gas industry. Correspondent Chika Bodozie has more.
The Petroleum Industry Bill was first introduced in the National Assembly in 2008 to promote efficient management and administration of the oil and gas industry. It was specifically crafted to optimize benefits accruing to the federal government from crude oil and gas production, strengthen capacity for regulators in the industry, maintain peace and stability in the Niger Delta, and restore investors' confidence in the oil and gas industry. In spite of its laudable goals, the PIB was not passed in 2008 for what was attributed to certain shortcomings in its provisions, as well as political considerations at the time. For the third time in 2016, it was considered and subsequently revised to produce a better framework to achieve set goals in the oil and gas industry. Consequently, and to facilitate the passage of the legislation, the PIB was split into 4 distinct bills, namely Petroleum Industry Governance Bill, Petroleum Industry Administration Bill, Petroleum Industry Fiscal Bill, and the Petroleum Host and Impacted Communities Bill. The federal lawmakers, in their wisdom, decided to kickstart with the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill, which was crafted to avoid previous shortcomings in the PIB and achieve the following objectives: unambiguous definition of roles and responsibilities for policymakers in the oil and gas industry, accountability and transparency, proper governance structure, and a more effective workable framework guiding oil and gas operations in the country. In May 2017, the Senate finally passed a revised version of the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill. Although it was widely applauded as a decisive step taken to introduce sanity in the country's ailing oil industry, President Buhari in 2018 withheld assent to the bill over constitutional and legal issues in the proposed law. After a long wait on Mr. President to revert to the National Assembly on the PIB, the recent development communicated to Nigerians by Temepria Silva is considered most welcome, as the anticipated law had become one of the oldest bills in the National Assembly.
It's unfortunate that this bill has been in the process of passage for a long time now, but I can tell you authoritatively that we have come to the end of the waiting. The government today shares a good relationship with the legislature. We are working together, we are on the same page, and we are all, there's consensus that this bill needs to be passed now.
For some Niger Deltans, however, it is not yet time to celebrate. In the revised PIB sent to the presidency for consideration and approval, there is provision for a new one-stop regulator to be known as Petroleum Products Regulatory Commission. It also provides for an unbundling of the NNPC into new limited companies, including a Nigerian petroleum company and the Nigerian Petroleum Assets Management Company. Furthermore, there is a planned sale in the bill of not less than 30% of the country's petroleum assets. As the proposed legislation eventually sees the light of day, some industry watchers would want to know the provisions made to protect the interest of oil-producing communities in its divestment plans.
We are no longer in 1969, where they did this in behind our backs. But we are in 2020. We should know what this bill has for the Niger Delta citizen.
Only recently, agitated Ijaw and Ishekiriti communities, as well as their neighbors in Isoko land, demanded a right of first refusal in the sale of 57 marginal oil fields in the Niger Delta. In their recent press briefings, the oil-producing communities maintained that their demand was to enable them partake in the economic benefits of oil and gas production in the Niger Delta. In solidarity with the agitated communities, other Niger Deltans insist that the revised petroleum industry bill must open the space for oil-producing states to compete favorably with other players in the oil and gas industry.
You took the oil from the Niger Delta and made it a Nigerian thing. At the moment, you have been given various oil blocks to people. Most of them are not from the Niger Delta. And each person that is given, or each group that is given, become billionaires automatically. The remaining part, which is run by an NPC on behalf of the nation, you now decide to privatize, to sell it off. So we're saying, if you must go on that plank of privatization, Niger Delta must be protected. At least 50% of whatever you want to privatize must be dedicated to the government and people of Niger Delta.
Nigeria's oil and gas industry currently accounts for over 80% of the country's foreign exchange, but contributes less than 20% to its gross domestic product due to the challenges of poor governance and management. The industry is further incapacitated by disjointed fiscal and regulatory provisions, as well as inefficiency in managing the downstream sector, all of which are contemplated in the anticipated Petroleum Industry Governance Law. While the panoply of reforms is expected to resuscitate Nigeria's ailing oil and gas industry, most Niger Delta activists maintain that it would come even more handy as a game changer in the ugly narrative of crude oil and gas production in their region, if concerns of host communities are captured in the bill. Hence, their call on the presidency to make provisions of the PIB known to the public as it enters a crucial stage of its passage into law.
Inside the Niger Delta.
From its humble roots in 1999, ITEO has grown to become one of Africa's fastest energy leaders, contributing in no small measure to the advancement of the Nigerian energy industry. Our integrated value chain in the upstream, downstream, and power sectors is underpinned by extensive local capacity development with significant opportunities to sustain ITEO's future business. In 2014, ITEO raised the single largest debt financing in Nigerian oil and gas sector from local banks to become the successful bidder for 45% of OML 29. ITEO is breaking new grounds. We have a clear vision for the future and the knowledge and assets necessary to provide for our energy needs on a regional and global scale. Get to know the future. The future is ITEO.
The controversy trailing the suspension of minimum wage for workers in Delta State is far from over, as professionals in the Niger Delta take the state government to task. In their reaction, the concerned professionals wonder why Delta State, which has consistently received the lion's share of monthly federal allocation, can no longer afford to pay the 30,000 minimum wage to workers. Correspondent Ekena Mofori tells us more.
The recent suspension of minimum wage payment to workers in Delta State with effect from July this year followed series of meetings between the Delta State government and organized labor. According to the state government, it was a painful decision occasioned by dwindling revenues following drastic cuts in crude oil production in the international markets. During the negotiations, 3 conditions were given to labor leaders. The first condition was that cooperative and other deductions would not be remitted for the next 6 months to meet payment of net salary. The second option was that workers on grade levels 1 to 6 would receive the 30,000 minimum wage, while those on level 7 to 17 were to revert to the old wage regime. And the last condition was retrenchment of workers to enable the government meet its wage bill. After considering all the conditions, labor leaders in Delta State chose the second option.
When we were approached to make some sacrifice to see that the state move forward, we had behind our minds the fact that the state government had always cooperated with us when it came to the issue of workers' welfare. And as he said, if one good turn deserves another.
In its reaction, the opposition All Progressives Congress described the state government decision as unacceptable and called on workers in the state to reject a deliberate attempt to dehumanize them. The ruling People's Democratic Party responded immediately that the All Progressives Congress was seeking cheap publicity with the revised minimum wage bill. It argued that Delta State was among the first states to implement the new 30,000 naira new minimum wage payment until the COVID-19 pandemic took a huge toll on the finances of the state. In addition to paucity of funds occasioned by drastic cuts in oil production, some state officials have submitted that Delta State had been compelled to make expenditures it never contemplated before the outbreak of the coronavirus disease in March this year.
We had a stadium, Stephen Keshi Stadium. It was meant for football and other games. But we are forced into creating an isolation center in the stadium. That's an additional forced cost.
The proposed wage review is a painful and difficult decision, but inevitable in our current circumstances. It is not a repudiation of the payment of the new minimum wage in the state, but a temporary measure that will be lifted as soon as the economy improves.
In line with its new austerity measure, the Delta State government had equally announced that all political office holders would forfeit 25% of their earnings as part of their own sacrifice to enable the state get back on its feet. But how the economic fortunes of Delta State declined to a point where it can no longer sustain the payment of minimum wage has become a source of concern for many. According to a recent report by the National Bureau of Statistics, Delta State, the current highest producer of crude oil in Nigeria, received the biggest allocation of 214.4 billion naira from a total of 2.53 trillion naira disbursed to states from the Federation account between January and November 2019. In the previous financial year, the state also got the lion's share of federal allocations with a total receipt of 215.4 billion naira. In addition to being the highest earner in federal allocations over the years, Delta State has ranked amongst top 10 states with the highest internally generated revenue profile in recent years. Human rights lawyer Frank Tiete said the economic recession attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic by the Delta State government was only an excuse to justify its anti-people's policy.
What kind of environment does the government provide to enable the people to have good and better living standards? That should be the barometer of governance, not a reduction in the standard of living, not using opportunities of COVID-19 to further increase the hardship of the people, whereas such periods of crisis should be opportunities for showing that government is there to help the people.
Frank Tietie took a swipe at labor leaders in Delta State for betraying workers' trust and confidence reposed in them. He called on the organized labor to rise to the occasion and champion the rights of Nigerian workers in Delta State.
If there is a cash crunch problem in Delta State, it can only be as a result of poor management, lack of ideas, and a situation of maladministration. The labor union should reverse itself, should realize that it is not only failing itself, failing its members, but it's failing the whole concept of trade unionism.
For his part, a university lecturer, Austin Sadu, blamed the current financial meltdown in Delta State on mismanagement of state resources. He said the Delta State experience was a typical example of how duplicated political appointment by state chief executives results in overbloated recurrent expenditures that continue to undermine sustainable economic growth and development in the country.
I don't understand. You have senior special assistant project, you have special assistant project, then you have a senior advisor, education matters, and you have a commissioner of education. Honestly speaking, we have failed. And unfortunately, many of our people are actually not thinking about what to do to overcome this. It has come to a point where we must come out and demand that the expenditure of government must be published. It's a common patrimony.
The inability of Delta State government to sustain its over 48,000 workers' wage bill of over 7 billion naira monthly is an indication that the rainy days are already upon an otherwise oil-rich state. The Delta State experience is instructive for other states that are almost entirely dependent on crude oil resources for their survival. Perhaps the biggest lesson from the entire scenario is the urgency for a transition from crude oil as mainstay of the Nigerian economy. Sadly, however, the Brace Commission, through which states in the country's South-South geopolitical zone intend to achieve economic diversification, has been comatose for several years. This has prompted most Niger Deltans to raise one salient question: where is the Brace Commission?
Inside the Niger Delta.
The Hydrocarbon Pollution Remediation Project, HYPREP, recently commissioned a cassava processing factory at KOROKORO in Tai local government area of Rivers State as part of its livelihood restoration efforts in Ogoni land. Minister of Environment, Dr. Mohammed Abubakar, who was represented at the occasion by HYPREP's coordinator, Dr. Marvin Dekil, described the initiative as a clear demonstration of the federal government's commitment to offer long-suffering Ogoni communities a new lease of life.
In line with its mandate to carry out remediation on polluted sites and restore livelihoods lost to many years of ecological devastation in Ogoni land, HYPREP has facilitated the establishment of a cassava processing factory at KOROKORO in Tai local government area of Rivers State. The project, funded by Stakeholder Democracy Network in partnership with the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, IITA, was initiated to promote food security and sustainable economic development in Ogoni communities. HYPREP's coordinator, Dr. Marvin Dekil, who commissioned the cassava processing factory on behalf of Environment Minister Dr. Mohammed Abubakar, said the factory will be operated by Ogoni youths trained by the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture.
The first outcome of this journey was the graduation of 15 trainees in the fabrication of cassava processing machines at IITA on Earth. Today is continuation of that success story with the official commissioning of this cassava processing factory after 3 months supervisory running of the factory by IITA and SDM.
The factory is to be operated by Ogoni youths who have been trained to fabricate and maintain the cassava processing machines. It has a capacity of processing about 5 tons of gari per day as soon as it becomes operational.
Per day means that this processing center should be receiving at least 15 tons of fresh root per day. So it's going to be a big catalyst for all farmers in Ogoni land. It's something that will really improve income and prove that it can improve income for both the youths who are going to be involved and for farmers.
The first batch of 15 Ogoni youths trained to operate the cassava processing factory will train other beneficiaries in due course. And to sustain the program, HYPREP has come up with a plan to organize Ogoni youths into cooperatives to enable them access funds to set up their own businesses.
This training has imparted a lot in our youth, and we are praying that this will come to stay. And from this point, Ogoni and the war will be our limit.
The cassava processing factory will also be available to households and individual farmers to process their produce. It will equally serve as a hub for trainees in the Ogoni Women Livelihood Training Program, currently being handled by the United Nations Institute for Research and the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture.
Inside the Niger Delta.
And with that report, we draw the curtain on the program. Inside the Niger Delta, the authentic voice of Nigeria's oil-rich region, will be back same time, same station next week. Until then, you can follow us on our social media handles showing right now on your screen. Until next week, remember to always wash your hands, maintain proper hygiene, and keep safe social distance to avoid contracting the deadly coronavirus disease. My name is Mamode Akugha. Thank you so much for watching, and bye for now.